Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching us. Well, journalists Angela Couloumbis and Marc Levy join me, but first, my special guest, the Governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, back after these words.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
All right, Governor Shapiro, let's start with the fact that you were a member of the State House of Representatives, a county commissioner in Montgomery County, I got that right, and Attorney General when you were frequently on the program. So you have a lot of experience, but there has to be surprises. There must be surprises when you took the oath of office. You're now more than 100 days in office. Give us a few.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll tell you, I'm blessed to have had the experience I've had, to be surrounded by an incredible team. And so I think we have a good sense of the issues, how to make decisions, how to execute. And we work hard at it every day. It doesn't mean that we don't make mistakes. We work hard at it every day, and I think we've got a great foundation. I think the thing that there's a couple of things that have surprised me. Number one, this feeling of humility. I feel very humble every day when I do this work. Yeah. Humbled by the extraordinary challenges that we face. Humbled by the faith people put in you to solving their problems and addressing their challenges. And so I feel humble every day. You don't walk around feeling like you're beating your chest or what have you. You just feel very humble. Yeah. And I think that's one thing. The second thing is I've been surprised a bit at the importance of a governor showing up. And let me explain what I mean by that. I think you know me. I work my tail off. I'm around the Commonwealth all the time. But the power of a governor showing up and validating the work of a community group or an individual or an organization or members of the General Assembly in supporting their efforts. And that is not unique to Josh Shapiro or Ed Rendell or Tom Ridge or Tom Wolf, Tom Corbett. I think it's unique to this position. And I'm now entrusted with that for a period of time. Yeah. And that is something that I've talked to other governors about to understand. Sure. And that's something that I take very seriously. Yeah. So I think that emotion of feeling humble all the time, and then also that power of showing up and the impact it has on a community, those are two things I'm not sure that I was
You mentioned some of the challenges, major challenges. What would you cite that you would obviously attempt to address in your term?
Well, look, I mean, these aren't things that are particularly different from the issues I've talked about. Making sure every child of God gets a quality education, no matter their zip code. Making sure people live in safe communities. I think people have a right to be safe and feel safe. We've got too many communities that have been hollowed out economically that need a resurgence. And I think you're beginning to see us delivering on some of the commitments that we made to address those challenges. But those challenges are immense, and it's something that we've got to come together on, Democrat, Republican alike, and address them.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is we live in a very big, heterogeneous state. I mean, it's large. Geographically, it's got a lot of different, what I call moving parts, suburbs, small towns, rural parts of our state, cities as well. So it's very complicated.
It is and it isn't, right? So the communities and the terrain look really different, but the challenges oftentimes are very similar. Let me give you an example. We've got areas of urban communities in Pennsylvania without access to broadband, high-speed internet. And that's the same thing in some rural communities. They couldn't look more different. Yeah. But these are areas where if we address that need, connecting people to the internet at high-speed, affordable rates, we can have an impact on urban and rural communities. So I think that the challenges that we face actually are a way to help bring communities that oftentimes look different superficially together.
Before we run to a break, I want to get to an issue, and I've interviewed, I think the rhetoric, over the past decade has become very sharp, very harsh, very difficult. I call it the partisanship. But that seems to have abated a good bit. I've had Republicans on the program, and when they talk about some of the differences, they say, we need to sit down and talk. They don't use the kind of harsh rhetoric And the same on your side of the aisle as well.
I've worked really hard to, as I always say, take down the temperature in the Capitol, bring people together, create an opportunity for dialogue. I work incredibly well with Kim Ward and Joe Pittman as an example of that, the two Republican leaders of the Senate, along with the Democratic leaders of the House and other leaders across the Commonwealth. And I think what we got away from over the last decade in this building, in the Capitol, is talking. You know, look, there are things that divide us. Kim Ward and I certainly have philosophical differences on some major issues. The key is not letting those differences make it so you can't make progress on the areas where you can find common ground. So I stress that every day. It's fine if someone doesn't like my idea, but you can't come to the table and just be a no. You got to come to the table with your idea. And if we bring new ideas to the table, we bring new ideas to the table, we're going to find common ground. We're going to get things done. I think you're beginning to see some concrete examples of that in the Capitol.
All right, expanding insurance coverage, the first bill. We're going to get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
All right, my guest is the governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro. All right, first piece of legislation, and we were talking about the lack of partisanship. I'll put it another way, bipartisanship.
Right.
And it has to do with breast cancer and ovarian cancer. What is in that law that you signed, and why is it important?
I think this is an example of a common sense solution to a significant challenge. First, the basic facts. What this legislation does is do away with the cost, co-pays, et cetera, for breast cancer screening and genetic testing associated with determining whether or not you're at risk for breast cancer. This is going to help a lot of women all across Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Here's why it's significant politically, in addition to just being something really important for women here in the Commonwealth. This was a bill sponsored by the pro tem of the Senate. That's a fancy word for the Republican leader of the Senate. Passed unanimously in the Senate and sent over to the House. Historically, where you had a bill that was prioritized by Republicans in Democratic House, Democrats might have sat on that bill, not moved it. But instead, the Democratic Speaker of the House scheduled it for a vote right away, passed unanimously in the House, and I signed it into law, flanked by two history-making elected officials, Pro Tem Kim Ward, the first woman to lead the Senate, Republican, Speaker Joanna McClinton, first woman to lead the House, Democrat. And it's an example of what we can do when we don't focus on the differences and the things that might divide us politically, but on finding common ground around common sense solutions that are going to help improve people's lives.
Yeah, bipartisan, as you point out.
Absolutely. And I expect to sign more bills like that that are the subject of compromise and negotiation and coming together. And I think that's a great beginning. And you know, hats off to Kim Ward, who's that Republican leader of the Senate. She battled and defeated breast cancer. She is tough as hell. And instead of just defeating it herself, she said, I want to do something for women all across Pennsylvania with the power that I have. And she used her power incredibly effectively. And I was proud that that was Act 1 of 2023.
Yep. All right, let's talk a little bit about tax and rent rebate.
Look, too many seniors are getting pushed out of their homes because of rising costs. And our state program called the Property Tax Rent Rebate, which is supposed to offset property taxes and rental costs for seniors, has been declining. Why has it been declining? Because it hasn't been updated in 17 years. So while seniors are getting a COLA for Social Security, for example, that's pricing them out of the property tax rent rebate. So in a nutshell, what my plan is that I've laid out in my budget, which lawmakers are considering now, is to nearly double the amount of the rebate from $650 to $1,000. and nearly double the number of seniors who qualify for it. Here in South Central Pennsylvania, Dauphin and Cumberland counties, just as two examples, about 15,000 seniors qualify right now. We're going to up that to nearly 20,000 seniors, and again, take the rebate from $650 to $1,000. This is meaningful.
Are you
for our
optimistic
seniors.
about this?
I'm optimistic because I've heard from Republicans and Democrats alike who say, look, we've got to do this. We've got to get this done for our seniors. And by the way, anybody who tells you it's too expensive and this and that, well, I say to them, we've got plenty of money in our state capital. It's about prioritizing our seniors. That's what I'm doing. It's fully paid for. And by the way, my overall budget, which funds this, doesn't raise a single tax. In fact, it cuts taxes, and it's conservative spending-wise. We've got to get this done for our seniors.
I have to ask you about every day on TV and newspapers, gun violence and crime. I mean, it's running wild.
It's unacceptable, and we cannot accept this level of violence in our communities, not just in Philly or Pittsburgh, but communities all across this Commonwealth. So we've got a multi-pronged approach to address it. Number one, we need to hire more police. How are we doing that? I'm funding 4 new cadet classes for our state police, giving every new police officer up to $7,500 in a tax credit back in their pocket for agreeing to be a law enforcement official here in the Commonwealth. Funding community anti-violence or violence prevention initiatives, because a lot of this has to happen before the police ever get involved. Historic investments in mental health, which oftentimes drive violence in our communities. Those are just to name a few of the areas of investment. I've tasked Austin Davis, our Lieutenant Governor, with leading the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency to make sure we're driving millions of dollars out into local communities to address violence in the way that they think works best. So we cannot accept this level of violence. The state has to be an active participant in addressing it, which we are, and obviously local governments have a large responsibility here as well.
Well, Governor, I want to thank you for coming on, and you're invited. You come back and give us an update soon.
Thank you, Terry.
All right, a couple of journalists are going to join me for what I call the big stories of the week.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, as I indicated earlier, Marc Levy with the Associated Press and Angela Couloumbis with Spotlight Pennsylvania joined me. Angela, I'm going to start with you. We've talked on numerous occasions before on this show about bipartisanship, about how difficult it is to get anything done. Both you and Marc have covered the legislature for many years. The fact of the matter is, if you can't sit down and talk with each other, if you can't sit down and try to reach the C word, compromise, how does the legislature get anything done? Bipartisanship.
Right, and what we've heard Governor Shapiro even today talk about is that he is trying to usher in this new era of bipartisan talks and working with the other side of the aisle and really trying to reach that compromise. And both sides have actually given lip service to that. But the jury's still out as to whether that's going to happen. The next 2 months are really going to be decisive in determining whether that he is able to achieve that in a legislature that right now one chamber is controlled by Republicans very firmly, and in the other, Democrats hold the advantage, but it's razor thin. It's a 1-seat majority.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is that given the nature of the partisan differences, a split legislature makes it difficult. For example, we have Governor Shapiro's budget that has to be done. What, June 30 is the traditional, the legal deadline. We'll see if that works out.
Right, and like Angela said, the next 2 months are going to tell us a lot about the tenor inside the Capitol, and Josh has tried to bring the temperature down as governor. But look, I mean, Republicans in the Senate started the session in January by muscling through some bare-knuckled bills. One of them is a constitutional amendment that would strip the governor of some of his authority to write regulations. So he has sown a friendly atmosphere. He's gone to districts of Republican lawmakers and appeared at news conferences with them and forged relationships with Republican leadership. But beneath the surface, they still do have their own priorities, and we'll know a lot more about how they work together when he has to get a budget through.
Yeah, that's really important because he has gone out of his way, I'm talking about Governor Shapiro, traveling around the state with not just Democrats but Republicans, talking about the Republican agenda as well as the Democratic agenda. And it really, we are definitely probably going to see with the governor's budget how much the partisanship levels have either, increased, decreased, or stayed the same, right?
Well, yeah, and what is so important to remember is that Governor Shapiro is not a novice at this. He's been in the legislature. He served in the legislature.
Right.
He understands how deals get done. But he is also facing a challenge in this upcoming primary. There is a special election out of Delaware County, and the results of that could affect the very tenuous balance of power in the state House and whether Republicans or Democrats will control it. If Republicans manage to regain the majority, they win that special election and they regain the one seat advantage, it's going to be a lot more difficult potentially for the governor to negotiate in that building.
Yeah. Let's run to a break. I talked with the governor about gun violence and crime. Let's talk a little bit about gun control bills that are in the legislature and see where that, how that all turns out.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine.
All right, gun violence and crime. Every single day there's a shooting. Crime is on the rise. It's in polling now becoming much more of a significant issue. And there is an agenda in the legislature dealing with gun control.
Right. The number of mass shootings is setting records this year across the country. And in the House, the Democrats are using their majority to advance 4 bills, 4 gun control bills. They're through a committee. They're poised for a floor vote. And if you know anything about the legislature, you know that historically it's been very protective of gun rights in Pennsylvania. We've probably seen one bill that dealt with any form of gun control in the last 15 years make it through to the governor's desk. This time around we have 4. We should see floor votes later in May in the House, unless they lose their majority in the special election. Then that could throw that into disarray. One of them has to do with selling trigger locks with long-barreled firearms. Right now, you're required to sell a trigger lock with a pistol or a handgun. Another is closing a loophole in background checks. Another is a lost and stolen reporting law, which is designed to crack down on straw purchases and gun trafficking. And then the 4th one is a red flag law, which would allow families and police to petition a court to order someone's guns to be taken away if they're showing signs of harming themselves or others. Now, Democrats see these bills as relatively moderate bills that could get Republican support. So far, though, we're not seeing Republican support for them in the House.
So now we're back to the point you made earlier about the Republicans control the Senate. If it passes, where does it go? Goes, if it passes the House, over to the Republican Senate and not likely to move.
Well, traditionally, budget time in the Capitol is also a big time for negotiating other, even non-budgetary issues. There's a lot of horse trading going on numbers, but also on issues. So the governor could choose to make this a very big issue in negotiations. It's going to be, my sense is and my prediction is it's going to be far different than what is being considered right now in the democratically controlled House. But if they do make some sort of advances on this issue, it will be a historic breakthrough on an issue that has been very difficult to negotiate in Pennsylvania.
You know, we're moving quickly to that January 30 deadline for the adoption of the state budget. Wouldn't be the first time in modern Pennsylvania history that the budget wasn't addressed on time. What are the major stumbling blocks as you see in your coverage relating to the budget and whether it gets passed on time?
Really, the major stumbling block is a long-standing one, and that's that Pennsylvania is a deficit state. It simply does not generate the tax collections to cover its costs. It's an older state. It has a lot of big health care bills for the elderly, and Pennsylvania, the state, is also on the hook to ramp up its spending on public schools now that a judge has said that its system of funding public schools is unconstitutional. So the governor's budget relies on $2 billion in reserves, and Republicans are concerned about that. Tax collections are going to slow down. The one thing the state has going for it now is it has roughly $13 billion in reserve. That's never happened in the history of the state as far as we know. That's money because of inflation really juiced up tax collections, and also because of billions in federal aid during the pandemic let Pennsylvania put a lot of money into reserve. But Republicans are protective of that. They don't want to spend it all and then have to raise taxes down the road.
But there is a little something for everybody. If we take the corporate net income tax, obviously Shapiro has said let's reduce it, and then you get, which make the business community happy. Then you have the minimum wage, which Shapiro says let's increase, would make Democrats and labor happy. So there are areas in there that look meaningful for compromise.
They do, but you're also looking at a very short negotiating period.
Good point.
And you know, in the scheme of things, it may not be that big of a deal. He still has another 3.5 years in front of him to try and negotiate some of these things. So I think he's kept it pretty quiet as to what he is going to really prioritize in this upcoming budget talks. I don't think he's going to get everything, but he's certainly going to try for one or two very significant policy wins.
Yeah, and it certainly looks like it. Getting it done close to on time, given the fact that there doesn't have to be tax hikes, looks very doable.
Look, Joe Pittman, the Senate Majority Leader, a Republican from Indiana County, was asked this a couple weeks ago, whether it would be a long, hot summer full of budget negotiations and late budgets, and he said maybe. So Republicans they're not guaranteeing anything, and they have priorities too.
All right, thanks for coming on for the update. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, you stay well.